You wake at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, heart pounding against your ribs like a prisoner demanding release. The dream is already fading, but the knowing remains. Something is coming. You saw it. You felt it with a certainty that bypasses all logic, all reason. 3 days later, it happens, exactly as you dreamed it. The phone call, the accident, the conversation that unfolds word for word as it did in your sleep. And in that moment, when the waking world mirrors the dream world with perfect precision, you feel something far worse than fear. You feel utterly, completely alone. Because who can you tell? Who would believe you? In a world that worships rationality, that demands proof and evidence for every claim, you've just experienced something that shouldn't be possible. You've touched a dimension of reality that science insists doesn't exist. And the moment you try to share this experience, you see it in their eyes. The polite skepticism, the subtle backing away, the unspoken diagnosis, delusion, coincidence, pattern-seeking gone wild. They smile and nod, but you can feel their judgment. You're the person who believes in magic, who sees meaning where there is only chaos, who mistakes random chance for cosmic significance. So you learn to stay silent. You carry these experiences like contraband, hidden away where no one can find them. Each premonitory dream becomes another secret, another piece of evidence that you're somehow different, somehow broken. The isolation isn't just social, it's existential. You're living in two worlds simultaneously. The world everyone agrees is real, and the world you know is real because you've seen it, felt it, dreamed it before it happened. And the gap between these worlds grows wider with each vision that comes true. The psychological burden is crushing, because it's not just about being believed or dismissed. It's about what this ability means. If you can see the future, even in fragments, even in symbolic flashes, then what does that say about the nature of time, of reality, of your own mind? Are you perceiving something that's actually there, or are you losing your grip on consensus reality? And worse, far worse, is the weight of foreknowledge itself. When you dream of something terrible and it comes true, the guilt arrives like a shadow. Could you have warned someone? Should you have tried? And when you do try, when you speak up and people dismiss you, and then it happens anyway, the helplessness is suffocating. But Carl Jung knew something that changes everything. In his own dream journals, kept meticulously over decades, Jung documented instances that defied every rational explanation. Dreams of events that had not yet occurred, visions of people he would meet months later. Symbolic imagery that predicted personal and collective catastrophes with unsettling accuracy. Jung didn't dismiss these experiences. He studied them. He tracked them. He treated them as data, as evidence of something profound about the nature of consciousness itself. And what he found shattered the comfortable assumptions of modern psychology. Jung discovered that premonitory dreams weren't random. They followed patterns. They appeared across cultures, across centuries, in people who had no contact with each other, no shared belief systems. A woman in Switzerland dreams of her brother's death in a car accident 3 nights before it happens. A man in India sees the face of his future wife in a dream 2 years before they meet. A child in America draws pictures of towers falling months before a national tragedy. Different people, different places, different times, but the same phenomenon, the same impossible knowing. Jung identified something his colleagues refused to acknowledge. The unconscious mind, that vast territory beneath awareness, doesn't operate within the constraints of linear time. While your conscious mind experiences reality as a sequence, as past flowing into present, flowing into future, your unconscious exists in what Jung called a timeless realm. The collective unconscious, that deep layer of psyche shared by all humanity, doesn't distinguish between yesterday and tomorrow. It holds patterns, potentials, archetypal energies that exist outside the stream of time as we consciously experience it. This is why premonitory dreams feel different from ordinary dreams. You know the difference if you've experienced both. Regular dreams are processing, sorting, symbolic play. They're your mind digesting experience, working through emotions, trying on different scenarios. But premonitory dreams carry a quality of absolute certainty. They have weight. They have a numinous quality, as Jung called it, a sense of significance that goes beyond mere symbolism. When you wake from a true premonitory dream, you don't wonder about its meaning. You know, The knowing is cellular, undeniable, terrifying in its clarity. Your rational mind, that voice that narrates your waking life, cannot access this level of perception. It's bound by the rules of causality, by the logic of sequence. But your unconscious mind is already there, already perceiving patterns that haven't yet manifested in physical reality. It sees the trajectory of events, the convergence of circumstances, the archetypal forces moving beneath the surface of everyday life. And sometimes in sleep, when the rational mind finally quiets, this deeper knowing breaks through. It sends you images, feelings, fragments of a future that's approaching, like a wave you can't yet see but can somehow sense. Jung spent years documenting the markers of genuine premonitory experience. And if you've lived through this, you'll recognize them immediately. The dream comes with unusual emotional intensity. You remember it with perfect clarity, sometimes for years. It often involves people or places you don't consciously know yet. And most tellingly, when the event occurs in waking life, you experience a shock of recognition so profound it feels like déjà vu amplified 1,000 times. Time collapses. The boundary between inner and outer reality dissolves. You're standing in a moment you've already lived in another dimension of consciousness. This isn't mental illness. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. Jung proved through decades of careful observation that certain individuals have a more permeable boundary between conscious and unconscious, between ego and self. And this permeability allows information to flow in ways that violate our common understanding of how minds work, how time works, how reality itself works. You're not broken. You're perceiving differently. Your psyche has access to dimensions of reality that remain closed to most people. And while this brings isolation, confusion, and the terrible burden of unexplainable knowing, it also means something profound. Your mind is touching the eternal. You've been carrying this weight, this inexplicable knowing, and the rational world has no container for what you've experienced. But Jung didn't just validate premonitory dreams. He discovered the mechanism. He mapped the territory. And what he found changes everything about how you understand the relationship between your mind and time itself. The key lies in what Jung called synchronicity. This isn't mysticism. This is a psychological principle that describes meaningful coincidences, moments when the inner world of the psyche and the outer world of events align in ways that cannot be explained by causality alone. When you dream of your grandmother's death 3 days before she passes, when you see the car accident in your sleep before it happens on the highway you take to work, you're experiencing synchronicity at its most profound and most disturbing level. Your unconscious mind is not predicting the future. It's participating in a dimension where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Jung discovered that the unconscious doesn't operate in linear time. While your conscious mind moves forward, second by second, day by day, your unconscious exists in what he called the eternal now. It perceives patterns, potentials, and probabilities that haven't manifested yet in physical reality. Think of it like this. Your conscious mind is reading a book, one page at a time, unable to see what comes next. But your unconscious mind holds the entire book simultaneously. It sees the narrative arc, the foreshadowing, the inevitable conclusions that the conscious mind hasn't reached yet. This is why premonitory dreams feel different from ordinary dreams. They carry a quality Jung called numinosity, a sense of weight, of significance, of undeniable reality. You wake from these dreams and you know. Not think, not suspect, you know. That certainty comes from the deepest layers of your psyche, from what Jung identified as the self. The totality of your being that exists beyond the limitations of ego consciousness. But here's where it gets truly profound. Jung realized that premonitory dreams aren't just about receiving information. They're about the unconscious mind processing data that your conscious awareness cannot detect. Your psyche is constantly absorbing information from the environment, from subtle cues in people's behavior, from patterns in events, from the collective unconscious itself. It synthesizes this information in ways that transcend logical analysis. And when it identifies a significant pattern, a trajectory that leads to a specific outcome, it communicates this to you through the symbolic language of dreams. The archetypal dimension is where future potentials exist. Jung understood that archetypes aren't just ancient symbols or mythological figures. They're organizing principles of reality itself. They're the deep structures that shape how events unfold, how people behave, how destinies manifest. When your unconscious taps into the archetypal realm, it accesses templates of what wants to happen, what is trying to emerge into reality. Your premonitory dream isn't showing you a fixed, inevitable future. It's showing you a pattern that has already begun, a trajectory that, unless something intervenes, will reach its natural conclusion. This is pattern recognition at a level that consciousness cannot achieve. Your rational mind analyzes data sequentially, logically, limited by what it can consciously perceive. But your unconscious mind operates holistically. It sees the entire field simultaneously. It recognizes patterns that span years, that involve multiple people, that connect seemingly unrelated events into a coherent whole. And when it perceives a pattern that matters to your life, to your survival, to your psychological development, it sends you a premonitory dream. Stop watching. Go to the comments and write, "I see my shadow." Do it now. Now that you understand the mechanism, the question becomes practical. What do you do with this knowledge? How do you live with premonitory dreams without being consumed by fear or paralyzed by foreknowledge? Jung developed specific methods for working with this capacity, and they can transform your relationship with your unconscious mind. The first practice is distinguishing between symbolic warnings and literal predictions. Not every disturbing dream is a premonition. Most dreams are symbolic, using the language of metaphor to communicate psychological truths. The dream of your house burning down might be about transformation, about old structures of identity being destroyed to make way for something new. Or it might be a literal warning about faulty wiring. Jung taught his patients to examine the quality of the dream, the feeling it carries, the symbols it employs. Premonitory dreams have a different signature. They feel more real than waking life. They lack the bizarre, shifting quality of ordinary dreams. They're often simpler, more direct, more focused on specific details that turn out to be accurate. The practice of active imagination becomes essential here. This is Jung's method for dialoguing directly with the unconscious. You sit with the dream. You don't analyze it intellectually. You enter into it imaginatively. You ask the dream itself what it's showing you. You allow the images to speak, to reveal their meaning through engagement rather than interpretation. And what emerges is often startling. The unconscious will clarify whether this is symbolic or literal, whether this is warning or inevitability, whether you're meant to act or simply to witness. Keeping the dream journal is not optional if you experience premonitory dreams. Jung insisted on this practice because it serves multiple functions. First, it creates a record that validates your experience. When the dream comes true, you have documentation. This matters psychologically. It counters the gaslighting you receive from a rational culture that denies the reality of what you've experienced. Second, the journal allows you to track patterns over time. You begin to recognize which dreams are premonitory and which are not. You develop discernment. You learn the language your unconscious uses to communicate with you. Third, the act of writing establishes a conscious relationship with the unconscious. It signals that you're paying attention, that you take these communications seriously. And the unconscious responds to this attention. It becomes clearer, more direct, more helpful. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. Working with premonitory dreams isn't about preventing the future. It's about integrating the knowledge into your psychological wholeness. Sometimes the dream shows you something terrible, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The death still happens, the accident still occurs, the relationship still ends. And you're left with the devastating question, why did I see this if I couldn't change it? Jung's answer is profound. You saw it because your psyche needed to prepare. The unconscious gives you foreknowledge, not to make you omnipotent, but to give you time to metabolize what's coming. To begin the grieving process before the loss, to gather your psychological resources before the crisis, to align yourself with what wants to happen rather than being blindsided by it. This is the ethical responsibility of premonitory awareness. You're not being given power over events. You're being given the opportunity to meet those events consciously, with awareness, with presence. Living with foreknowledge without being paralyzed by it requires a fundamental shift in perspective. You must understand that seeing a potential future doesn't obligate you to change it. Sometimes the most profound act is acceptance, witnessing, allowing. Jung worked with patients who tried desperately to prevent what they'd seen in dreams, only to discover that their very attempts to prevent it brought it about. This is the ancient pattern of prophecy. The tragic structure where foreknowledge itself becomes the mechanism of manifestation. The transformation happens when you move from fear to reverence. When you stop experiencing premonitory dreams as a curse and begin recognizing them as communication from the deepest part of yourself. Jung believed that the self, the totality of who you are, guides you through life using every tool available. And for some individuals, premonitory dreams are part of that guidance system. They're not random. They're not punishment. They're the self showing you what you need to see when you need to see it, in the only language that can bypass the rational mind's defenses. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes central. The journey towards psychological wholeness requires integrating all aspects of yourself, including this capacity to perceive beyond linear time. You cannot become whole while rejecting or fearing this part of your psyche. The premonitory dreams are asking you to expand your understanding of what consciousness is, what time is, what reality is. They're initiating you into a larger vision of existence. And here's the final revelation Jung offered. This ability exists for a reason. Evolution doesn't preserve capacities that serve no function. If certain minds can access information beyond the present moment, there's a purpose to that access. Jung believed it was preparation, not just for individual events, but for something larger. The individuals who dream the future are scouts, advanced sensors for the collective. They're touching what's emerging before it fully manifests. And while this brings suffering, isolation, and the terrible burden of knowing, it also means you're participating in something that transcends your personal life. You're connected to the unfolding of reality itself in ways that most people never experience.